it just seems like the theme for sports throughout the last calendar year has been redemption. We've seen the Cavaliers win the NBA championship after losing the year before. We have seen Clemson win the national championship after a heartbreaker in last year's championship game. And now we have the North Carolina Tar Heels winning the 2017 NCAA tournament after losing a heartbreaker to Villanova last year. So where do we go from here in sports? Do the Indians win the World Series this year? Do the Atlanta Falcons win next year's Super Bowl? One could only hope. Anyway, let's break into the game. Honestly, this game could have gone either way. I mean, it can almost be said as a tale of two halves. I mean, the first half was just a highly defensive game. So many shots were being blocked. However, North Carolina was out-rebounded in the first half. And I believe I sent out a tweet with, in particular, I said one of the keys of the game was going to probably be the points in the paint, because we were going to see a bunch of them. And it didn't disappoint. We're seeing a lot of shots in the paint. Like, we didn't see a lot of three-pointers in the first half, but we did see quite a bit of them in the second half. Anyway, I said Karnowski and Kennedy Meeks was going to be a big matchup to watch throughout the entire night. And Meeks held his end of the bargain on defense. I mean, I feel like if it weren't for Kennedy Meeks, North Carolina is going into the half probably down by 9 to 12 points if it weren't for Kennedy Meeks on defense. Because Karnowski had about 4 or 5 open layups a little bit, but Kennedy Meeks kind of frightened him a little bit. He kind of riled him up. That's what North Carolina needed. However, I want to get to probably the most ridiculous point in the game. All these fouls being called. I believe we had at least 21 fouls called in the first half of the second half. So with my estimation, we probably got close to at least 30 fouls in the second half alone. But you would think in a championship game like this, where everything is on the line, with all the blood, sweat, and tears from both these teams all year long, for a championship at stake, you'd think they'd let a bunch of calls go. But they didn't. I believe this is probably the most, I think it's probably the most fouls called in a game in national championship history. I mean, if it's not, it's got to be like really close. And I believe we had about maybe, it feels like we had about 18 fouls in the first half. So both teams were in foul trouble throughout most of the game, throughout most of the second half in particular. But in the end, it was Gonzaga's that was in more foul trouble when you had Collins fouling out with 5 minutes left. You had Karnowski sitting on the bench most of the second half with 3 and 4 fouls sitting in foul trouble. And Jordan Matthews fouling out with about 2 minutes left in the game. So that is one of the things that ultimately got North Carolina the win. Was the foul trouble Gonzaga had. And I did say that North Carolina is probably one of the most deepest teams in this tournament. And other players for North Carolina really stepped up. Joel Berry stepped up. I mean, many didn't even think he was going to be much of a factor with the ankle injury all tournament long. But he did knock down a couple of shots late in the second half. However, on a final note, I did say at the beginning of the tournament, whoever won the Elite Eight matchup between North Carolina and Kentucky, at least the potential matchup, was probably going to win the whole tournament. And that was correct. Now, I'm not going to brag about it at all. I'm just going to say that I just got that one right, and as far as the brackets were concerned, I recovered from my worst year ever last year to probably one of the best I've had. But I think the best overall I've had was 2 years ago, when the Final Four was just so obvious. And then probably my second best was the year I got into basketball. So, Anyway, I want to kind of preview college basketball a little bit next year. I'm going to give out 3 teams that can make a run to the Final Four next year. And one should be obvious. I feel like Gonzaga can easily get back to the Final Four next year. I mean, I'm going to hold myself accountable. I've been calling Gonzaga overrated all season long. But in the end, I realized that you don't just lose 2 games in the year, and one being the championship game, by accident. I mean, Gonzaga got there for a reason, and I now have respect for Gonzaga, and I'm going to be open to rooting for them next season. Second team that can make a run to the Final Four next year. This could be a surprise, but Texas A&M. I'm not saying this because I'm a huge fan of Texas A&M athletics. I'm saying this as I have a bunch of talent coming back next year. I mean, big man Tyler Davis, big man Robert Williams. I get South Carolina vibes out of that team. And you got DJ Hogan to shoot the 3-pointer. Tony Troshmer-Lalo's coming back. Admon Gilder coming back. I mean, Texas A&M is going to be loaded next year in basketball. I mean, they can make a run to the Final Four. And the third team that can make a run to the Final Four. Now I have to think about this one for a little bit. But I feel like a team that could make the Final Four next year. I would say either Michigan State or I would say possibly Xavier. Or Xavier. That's how you say it. Because Xavier just made a huge run to the elite, and there's going to be quite a bit of players from that team coming back next year for Xavier. So they can make a run to the Final Four next year. Michigan State had a young team this year and still made the tournament. They could make a run at the Final Four next year. I mean, I'll even just say this for my Nebraska folks out there, but I think Creighton could make a run to the Sweet 16 next year if Justin Patton were to stay. However, basketball's not really over yet. There's still NBA basketball, even though some may think it's obvious, but it may not be obvious yet. We're going to do an NBA mock draft pretty soon. I just got to get the NFL mock draft 5.0 going. So we're going to have that on Friday. If something else crazy develops in sports until Friday, I'm not going to make another video until Friday. Anyway, that's going to do it. Like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Twitter, JB Talk Sports. Share this with your friends and family. Have a great night or day, depending on when you're watching this. I will see you next time.